Hey everyone, Sky here to discuss 2001: A Space Odyssey, starring Dalia, Gary Lockwood, William Sylvester, Daniel Richter, and Leonard Rossiter. I don't know if I'm saying that wrong, please forgive me. And directed by Stanley Kubrick. Now, before I get into this movie, I saw this for the first time. I saw the movie and I fell asleep, admittedly, because it was just boring at the time and I couldn't be able to appreciate how good of a film it was. So I watched it a couple more times and thought it was mediocre, and then I saw it on IMAX theaters and 35 millimeter film when for the IMAX is when they re-released it for IMAX, and 35 millimeter I went to Quentin Tarantino's theater in Los Angeles to go see it there. So with a friend of mine. So let's just get straight into this and see if my remaining review is still correct. We open the film after a piece of score with some classic music, which came from this movie, and we see other planets on the screen. And this movie has a fantastic score, which will be used often as it is today. Then we get to the dawn of man with some apes on planet Earth, eating, scaring off other animals who take their food, getting attacked by cheetahs, drinking water, to a couple of apes beating each other up with bones. And I love the way Stanley Kubrick films these scenes in the wildlife. Even though it was people in costumes, I will admit, it's some great shots that'll haunt me from the very beginning of this movie, and it will suck you into the movie. For example, an ape beating up some bones, and they see a rectangle stand that looks like something from outer space standing tall. As the score in that very scene is very haunting, and I'm enjoying the first 30 minutes of apes going wild. And yes, that entire sequence, 25 minutes into the movie, and if you think it's that slow, it takes time for the movie to move the movie along during to outer space. But hey, I'm enjoying the beginning otherwise. We get to outer space with another genius piece of music that'll be repeated in other movies. And outer space in this movie looks absolutely gorgeous on my 4K TV and on the 4K Blu-ray. And we get instead inside of a spaceship. We see things floating from and people watching some TV as one man named Dr. Floyd falls asleep. And I love how mesmerizing this movie looks. It just looks amazing. Like, as amazing in the 3D world of Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity, for example. Dr. Floyd goes in a beautiful room where he makes a phone call to his wife and a daughter who has a birthday the next day, as well as the birthday party. And the daughter asks for a bush baby for her birthday. And the cinematography in this movie looks absolutely beautiful. I can't believe my eyes on how beautiful it looks for 1968. We move on to a spaceship going to the moon, which is where Dr. Floyd is going to, and the set decorations in those scenes are absolutely amazing to look at. As they arrive to the moon, they go to in a space station. We get a meeting with Dr. Floyd and a group of people in space, and no, there's no creatures like there is in Star Wars 9 years later, excuse me. But they talk briefly about their mission on the moon, and some astronauts find the rectangle standing up looking thing with that creepy sounding score. And oh my god, it haunts me every time I hear that piece of music, as I'm thinking this one is one of the great outer space stories. It may take a few viewings to get used to how slowly paced it is, but it is one of the great outer space stories. The astronauts gets a picture of the rectangle standing thing as it makes a very loud noise, which is very frightening because that these people would die to get a picture, which with it, and we never know what happens to them at the end of the scene because we move on to another story, and it is strange, but at the same time, it's great filmmaking to use your imagination. We move on to 18 months later to the Jupiter mission as we see Dave jogging and getting exercise in space as we follow him around, and we see another man watching BBC who happens to be Frank, on the TV, and the interview with Dave and Frank, who happens to be his partner, along with the computer HAL, or as they call it, HAL, or HAL 9000, whatever you want to call it. And HAL is one freaky robot with how it sounds, and it'll eventually go AI, aka artificial intelligence. And I like this story with Dave and Frank and Hal. It works very well for a scary robot situation that other movies will eventually do in the future. I keep calling Hal a robot, but what it really is a red dot controlling the ship to see if things on the ship go smoothly as possible. I do like how Hal is one scary robot with the red dot as the audience can see him. We get to the pod doors and they go to space or in space to switch out a tool from old to a new piece of part. And I like how intense the scene really is. Dave and Frank go gets orders from mission control, and they think there's something wrong with whatever the order is, and Hal going AI on them as Hal sees their lips moving and goes to intermission. And that was a scary way to go on the intermission. And like it got me intent, or it's intense, and I really love how they keep I love how the filmmakers keeps us in suspense on what's going to happen after the intermission. After the intermission, Frank is in space while Dave checks on him in the pod, and Hal pushes Frank away just out of the blue, and as it kills him, and Dave saves him and tries to get Frank back in the ship, and Hal says the classic line, "I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that," which is the best line in this whole movie. Meanwhile, life functions have been terminated by, I'm guessing, Hal doing it on his own, and as he's afraid Dave was going to shut down Hal, and Frank, as he leaves the conversation with Dave, as he goes through the emergency doors and leaves Frank in space, and he opens the emergency door and lets himself in by ejecting off the pod. And Dave shuts down Hal as Hal sings the song called Daisy, and it slowly faints as the room has a message that they're in Jupiter in space, and we get to Jupiter and beyond the infinite, and we see the rectangle shape in space as we see Dave's face and eyeball at times as it turns colors, and we see a room that looks fancy, and it ends with a baby in an egg, unborn yet, which is a very strange last 25 minutes. Or last hour for the intermission, I'll say. But I do love the way we end it with the score and seeing the baby's face as well as eyes, as the movie looks absolutely tremendous. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 9.5 out of 10. Other than Star Wars, it's one of the greatest outer space adventures ever, and I also like how strange this movie can be at times. The score is absolutely tremendous as it looks great from 1968 to 2021, particularly on a 4K TV and a 4K Blu-ray presentation. The movie is very intense and slowly paced, which will take maybe a few viewings to appreciate the movie that it is today. So I would like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with 2010, the year we make contact. And until next time, I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.